Unemployed and Afraid acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we have recorded this episode on and of the land where you, the listener, are tuning in from. We would like to pay our respects to elders past, present, and extend our respect to any First Nations, Aboriginal, and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today, acknowledging that this always was and always will be Aboriginal land.
Welcome to Unemployed and Afraid, a podcast that explores the messy middle of being out on your own and starting over with the people who've done it. I'm your host, Kim Curtin. Thank you for being here. Let's get into today's story of starting over. Hello, here we are for another episode of Unemployed and Afraid, delving into the stories of starting over. And you might be here because you're starting a new business or brand and need a little bit of extra motivation to keep plowing through the exciting unknown. Or maybe you're considering a change, sensing that what you're doing right now is no longer the right fit. Or maybe you're well into your journey of new and exciting career things and just keen to connect with like-minded humans. And whatever the reason you've chosen this pod, I am grateful you're here and excited for your journey. And today's guest is Jenna Hutchison, aka Love Ludie. And she is, in short, bloody inspiring, a creative powerhouse who follows her heart. She trusts her instincts and doesn't shy away from talking about how scary doing that really is. In this episode, we talk about gaining and leaving amazing opportunities, taking huge risks in business, being on the skins of your knees with finances, and starting a whole new career on a whim and having it take off. And before we get into it, let me plant a little seed for you. If you're listening to this episode now in May 2022, this pod is less than 6 months old, a baby in the big wide world of content. I've been on a journey of starting over myself for a couple of years now, following curiosities, creative pursuits, figuring out how I can add value and work in line with my passions and values, just all sorts of things. And this podcast is an example of trying something new that feels right just to see where it can go. And right now, it's a fully independent production. So to grow, I need your support. Without it, well, I'm pretty well cooked. So if you're here and you're finding value in this creation, here's a few things you can do to help it keep going. You can tell your friends and family and colleagues about it, especially if you think they could benefit from a little extra support to back themselves. You could share the pod and tag at Unemployed and Afraid on your socials. And these two things, sharing with your friends, families, and colleagues and tagging on the socials, are a massive thing for a growing business. Even if you think, oh, I only have like 100 people on my page and it's not going to make a difference, let me tell you, it really, really does. It helps me reach a whole new audience. You can also leave a review so that when people find the pod, they feel confident it's worth their time. It doesn't need to be War and Peace, but Lord, does it make a difference. And finally, if you work in the advertising industry or you know a brand that would love to support a podcast like this, I'd love it if you could tell them about it. Because to keep growing, I really need some aligned partners to get integrating with. Okay, have I talked enough? I think I have. Yeah, I've talked enough. Thank you for allowing me to interrupt your listening, to ask for your help. We cannot do this stuff alone. Now, let's get inspired to create our own unique world. Here is my chat with the fabulous Jenna Hutchison. I'm here with the fabulous Jenna Hutchison, aka Love Ludie. She's a full-time self-taught artist, a vibrant color queen, and all-round high vibes human. And if you're not familiar with her work, go hit pause, search for Love Ludie on Insta, follow, enjoy, come back, and we'll get into it because you absolutely need the colors and energy of Jenna's work in your life. Even if you're an earth tones / wears too much black gal like me. Jenna paints from her beautiful off-grid home studio. She shares art workshops and has collaborated with some incredible brands like The Dairy, Microsoft, Adobe, Coast Seltzer, and past Unemployed and Afraid guest, Yogi Peace Club. In researching Jenna, I found the below quote, and we love a quote. She said, "I want to express that you can follow your heart and become whatever weird and wonderful person you not only want to be, but are supposed to be." Amen, gal. I can't wait to hear all about your journey so far. Welcome to Unemployed and Afraid.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I was like, when did I quote that? But I think it's like, I live by that.
It's a real good one. It's from one of your past interviews, and I was like, I could low-key put that on a poster and put it on my computer. That's a good one.
Paint it up on a canvas or something.
I really am excited to hear your story, and we've been chatting a little bit before we hit record. You're an inspiration to so many, but what I love the most about you, Jenna, is you are just you on all the platforms. I'm excited to get into it. Let's break the ice a little bit more before we go, though. I want to know how your boyfriend would describe you.
Oh my gosh. I would love to say amazing.
naturally?
I think no, I don't think. I know, because he says it all the time, how much he like looks up to me and what I do and how I do it. And I think he's incredibly proud of me. I would say amazing.
That's lovely. Yeah. It's really support. It's nice to have that support when you're out there and you're doing things, so that those little reminders.
Yeah. And I think just the transition up to this new life as well. Yeah, you've got to be pretty resilient to live like off grid on the top of a mountain. So yeah, amazing and resilient.
And you can always ask him after and see how it compares. Don't tell him you answered for him.
Yeah. He's like, oh my God, you're so annoying.
So Jenna, who were you before the Jenna that I'm speaking with today?
I think elements of who I am today have always been in me. And I think everything that I have done and been through has led me to who I was meant to be. But I used to be a lot quieter. I used to be a lot more reserved. I used to be a lot more sensitive. I used to be very unsure about who I was and what I was doing. Like even in high school, I remember like careers guidance counselors or whatever they were. They're like, what do you want to do? And I was like, I don't know. Like, never knew. I was always quite unsure, always quite creative though. But yeah, very reserved, a lot quieter. I never, like if you had have told me 15 years ago that I would be doing what I do, like in front of a camera sometimes, not always, talking to followers, I would be like, no way. No way. And just giving people advice, like life advice, creative advice, like, yeah, I think I'm a lot more confident now. And I think that just comes with loving what I do and yeah, that surety of myself.
Yeah, it is a real journey, isn't it? I remember reading about you that there was a time you felt really misaligned in your work and in your study. So before you went full-time into art and went on this journey, there was a time where your work wasn't quite matching your vibe and your energy. What did that feel like for you?
That was hard. It's like, the best way I can sort of describe it is like two opposite magnets that are just will never go together, but you're constantly trying to force them. And yeah, I think I was going against the flow so much in my life. And, you know, obviously my parents were an engineer and a nurse and very career driven and 9 to 5, like you work, you get married, you have kids, like that whole structure. And I just felt confused by that. I was like, that's not me. Like, I don't get it. I don't want to be that person, nor does it feel right for me. So yeah, I think I just felt stuck because I wasn't honoring my natural flow of life or really understood what that was, even at the time.
And at that time, you went into designing for a fashion house in Melbourne. Doing so, might I point out, sans design degree, which is awesome. Tell me about that experience, how that came about.
Yeah, so I studied RMIT, where I actually did like color studies, which I now realize the inevitable. But I was very interested in design, like interior design, architecture. So I started doing courses at RMIT. And then I think in the midst of my haze and confusion about what I was doing in life, I signed up for a interior design course at CATC Design School. And I was like, yeah, let's just give this a crack. And ended up graduating like top of my class, Melbourne People's Choice Award, Australian Design Award. And yeah, I was like, okay, maybe I am creative, and just sort of rolled into that. Got my dream like internship. I got the only internship that the college was offering. Got my dream job in like a very small architectural firm in Collingwood. And then big life changes happened for me and completely changed my course of life. After I had sort of like picked myself up from that, I ended up working in, I just think, the fashion store in Melbourne actually. And within a couple of weeks, they're like, we want to pull you into head office. You should be designing. I think I had actually been to Bali and done like things like, you know how you can get stuff made over there?
Mm-hmm.
I'd found all these cool fabrics and I was like, oh, I'm going to get all these fun outfits made. And I used to wear them in the store. And they're like, where's this from? And I was like, oh, I just sort of made it myself. Well, I got it made, designed it in Bali. And they're like, oh my gosh, you need to be in our head office. Ended up like designing my own range. And yeah, I think I think obviously when I put it like that and I dot point it like that, it sounds very infuriating and frustrating, for someone that is probably studying fashion and trying to get into the industry. It was a lot of hard work, and I definitely didn't see myself going down that avenue, especially from an architecture point of view. But yeah, I ended up in fashion design, which is crazy, very crazy.
The universe has a funny way of gently directing us into different pathways, I find.
Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily mean, that there's anything, wrong with finding yourself in that space. It's, I think what's meant for you is for you, and what's not meant for you doesn't come.
It's like that little quote I always say to myself, like, what is meant for you will not go past you.
That's the one.
And it was like sitting in that office that the brainchild of Love Ludie came about. So I'm just sort of like trying to track my mind back now as we speak. I'm like, why did I leave fashion? Like, how did that end? But I used to sit at my desk every day in Melbourne on Chapel Street, and I'd buy a candle every week. I just completely forgot about this part of my life. And I was sitting there one day and I was like, oh my gosh, I should just like try and make candles myself, just so I'm not spending like $50 on an Akoya candle every week. Just so my desk smells nice. Like, what? Anyway, I did like the classic opening the web browser while you're at your office desk, looking at other stuff. And I remember ordering all this wax and all these wicks, and I was like, I'm just gonna make my own candles and I'll bring them in. Oh my gosh, I never knew that little box that I was opening. Long story short, I was making candles for my desk. My boyfriend at the time was one of his friends was getting married at the Vue de Monde in Melbourne. And she was like, we need some candles for the wedding. And I was like, I make candles, I'll do them. She's like, no worries, cool, perfect. And then I wanted to get creative and start like painting the labels for the candles. Painted all the labels. Long story short, this wedding ended up being photographed in Vogue. She was like, so what are the candles called? Because they want to know, because there's imagery of just the candles. And I was like, oh my God, Love Ludie. Let's just go with Love Ludie. Ludie was the name of my imaginary friend when I was little. So it's just like a creation of the imagination. Let's roll with that. Bang.
Wow.
I ended up leaving my fashion job because I was getting stockists. I was selling candles. I had a website. It just blew up. I was in like just under 100 retail stores in Australia, stocking candles, making crazy amounts of candles like every day. I had a studio in Bells Beach where I'd pour candles. And then, oh my gosh, my journey has been wild. I'm like, how did I become an artist now? Like, how did I get to that next stepping stone? But if we're ready to go there, I can tell you.
I would love that. Yes, give it to me.
So I'm making my candles. And then a lot of the retailers were like, we need boxes. Like, you need to put them in boxes. They're just easier to ship for us, etc. I'm like, all right, how can I incorporate the boxes to still be like all handmade and hand created? Because a lot of the type on the candle labels were actually hand calligraphy and watercolors and all of that. So I was like, cool, maybe if I just get some paints, I can sort of learn how to paint and create some cool boxes myself, and we'll just take photos of them and get them printed. I go to the art store. I remember this day so clearly. I spent so much money on art products. I still do. And I think I spent like $1,000 on paints. And I remember going home and standing outside, like on this little tarp with this canvas. And I was like, oh, I don't even know what to do. Like, I'm just going to play around and experiment. Anyway, I started sharing the process on Instagram, and no one cared what they were for. They're like, we don't care that they're candle boxes. Like, show me the artwork. Are you going to do more of those? Like, how did you do that? And I was like, I don't know. Like, I'm just going to keep painting, keep creating, keep experimenting. And I fell down that hole, and I don't ever want to get out because I love it here. I just started painting and I have never stopped. I just got addicted to creating and coming up with my own techniques and seeing how things work with each other. And yeah, just that experimental aspect, I guess. It's addictive and amazing. And yeah.
When you were standing in front of that canvas and you were like in that moment where you're like, right, I've got the paints, I've got the paintbrush, I'm gonna start somewhere. Where did you start on the canvas?
I remember like mixing all the paint together. I think I had like obviously seen people paint how they do like a messy pour and they pour it all in the cup and just like tip it over and watch it all spread out.
Yeah.
I think that I still have this piece of artwork actually. I need to post it and be like, guys, for sale. No. Yeah, it was just this drippy, messy amazingness. And I wanted to do like each color combination to represent the scent or the fragrance of the candle. So I was doing like all these different color combinations, and it was just like this whirly swirly color mess. And then I just got addicted to learning about different types of art products and different types of paint and what they did and why they were different. And I remember going to the art store and just wanting to like get something new each time. And I had seen people work with resin before. And I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to buy resin because it really wasn't cheap at the time. Well, it's gone very glary. And I just sort of got really addicted to finding my own technique and way of doing things. And I remember so clearly going to the art store and buying resin. I was like, what is resin? Like, how does it work? And the lady's like, does this, it does that, do this. But whatever you do, don't mix it with water. Like, don't get water near it. I'm going to give away one of my techniques, yeah. But I remember driving home and I was like, I can't wait to mix it with water. Like, I just wanted to know like what it did. And I just, not that I wanted to be different in any way, but I just sort of had this mentality of, if everyone else is doing it this way with a structured method, like what would happen and what could I create if I did it differently? So I remember driving home and I got there and I just mixed resin with all these different like types of water. Like I'd pour it in water, I'd pour it on water, I'd spray water on it. And I was like, this is sick. And that is one of the methods that I now teach in my workshops. And people are like, I would just never think of this. Like, you've just got to think outside the box sometimes. And if you want to be different, you got to do different. So,
gosh, what a journey. I mean, that whole journey, even with the candles, going from, just probably YouTubing a bunch of things and writing a few things down and then being in a store. I imagine even I'm going right back there because I'm still hung up on this story. Even getting in the process of knowing what to do to put your pieces in stores, like wholesale and invoicing and all of the random things that come out of that. That must have been a full-on journey too.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Like even just like coming up with a name, like I had to like backtrack to create a business name because I was going to be in a magazine. Like what? And I had no idea. I remember I was living in Bali at the time when things sort of, because after the wedding we went to Bali because his parents had a villa there, spent some time there. And I was like, I just remember looking at my computer and there was emails coming through being like, oh, we'd love to stock your candles. Like, what range do you have? And I was like, all right, I need a range. Like, I'm ended up here and I need to sort of stepping stone back here and make my way back here professionally. But yeah, I didn't know how to invoice. I didn't know how to do any of that stuff. So that was a lot to take on.
Google just becomes your best friend sometimes in those spaces, doesn't it? Just, okay, there's an opportunity here. I have to very quickly try to save face and just kind of figure out what I'm doing and then go for it.
Like, what is a spreadsheet? I live for spreadsheets now, but yeah, it was a lot to wrap my head around at once. And I sort of like, I didn't want to lose any of that traction. So I was sort of trying to maintain that traction whilst trying to like physically and mentally keep up with what was going on. So I definitely worked way too hard. I definitely burnt out at some stage. And I did it with painting as well. Like I pretty much was forced into, I just remembered the whole 5 years that I had a clothing store as well. Yes. So I had a clothing company called Hutch. So I ran that for 5 years. This was while candles was happening. I actually went into the Princess Polly store to stock candles. And then normally I'd like drop them off deliver them with a courier. And I was like, oh, I'll come in and drop them off. I'll have a look around, buy some stuff. And the girl that was running Princess Polly at the time, she was like, oh, thanks for dropping them off. By the way, I just want to let you know that I'm selling the business. And I was like, cool, maybe I'll buy it. Like, had no intentions of ever having my own clothing store or my own shop. And yeah, to fast track that story, that was 5 years. That ended right before COVID. And thank God it did, because that was a blessing in disguise. Very much so. Like, it was end of lease and the landlords sort of came in and were like, you can either sign on for another 5 years or, I don't know, you can end your lease. And this was, I think, January 2020. And like, yeah, we'll end the lease, go online. And 2 weeks later, COVID hit and just shut down the world. And I just cannot believe like how much that was a blessing in disguise, because I mean, I watched friends that have retail stores and brick and mortar and businesses like that, and how hard that was for them. So at the time, it was like the biggest decision of my life. And once I'd made that decision, got it off my shoulders, and then everything happened, I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's divine timing right there. God, even having, I mean, I imagine that you sold your beautiful candles in the store as well. Is that sort of a bit of integration there? Yeah. That would have been a huge journey for you, just, figuring out, I mean, stocking and, staff, just the whole thing. What a thing to take on.
And pricing, like I didn't know how much to like wholesale a candle for, like what were margins, like I didn't know any of that. And I probably and most definitely sold myself short at times, but it's about learning and it's about growing, and you've got to start somewhere. So
I relish stories like yours, because the element of not planning, but the element of just noticing what's interesting, what's curious, allowing yourself to suck a little bit at the first instance and buy stuff and learn stuff and throw things in the bin that don't work and let it evolve and kind of trust your instincts. I mean, naturally, that's, I'm very drawn to your story. I'm not exactly a planner myself.
And you have to sort of like fall down that like slippery slope of mistakes. That's how you build like a solid foundation of who you are and what you're doing and what not to do, because you just sort of cruise along and everything's peachy. You've got to learn somehow. You do. And I'm still doing it as I'm an artist now. Like I still make mistakes. I still surprise myself. I still disappoint myself. So
tell me about the experience or the time where you went from store, candles, experimenting with art into full-time art. How did that come about?
So after the store, we were like, let's just go online. We'll just run the online store. COVID was pretty deep at this stage. So we were still like, oh my God, what is going on? Like the weight of the world was so heavy throughout that time. It was hard to sort of navigate your own personal life when everything like that was going on. When I say we, it was me and my little sister. So we were struggling to get stock, which majority of it came from China. They weren't doing shipments. Like everything had pretty much stopped. We tried the online store. We gave it a good crack. It wasn't really working. Then, when was this? This was probably like end of 2020. I was like, okay, this isn't working. I'm going to try and get, what was it, like the Centrelink thing, the payments and stuff, which I had never had before, so I didn't know what I was doing. And I remember going on to the website, like the VicGov website, and they're like, oh, we need your driver's license for details. And I had no money at this point. Like we'd poured everything into like trying to hold up the online store, trying to buy stock. We weren't like that financially stable. And they're like, what's your license number? Like enter your license number so we can give you, what is it, JobKeeper? What's the word?
JobKeeper. Yeah. No, well, it's JobKeeper and Job Seeker. So
yes, I think I was applying for one of them. They're like, all right, cool, details. What's your license number? I put my license number in and they're like, oh, your license has expired. And I was like, okay, log on to Vic Roads and your license is $28 or however much it is. And I didn't have $28 in my account. I was like, okay, what do I do? And I just remember walking out into my studio, which was back then like a garage with a lawnmower in it. Like, it was not an established studio back then. And I was like, right. And I had all these like old canvases that I would experiment on. And I think I'd sold 2 pieces of artwork over the 2 years that I was painting, like 2 pieces of artwork. So I painted every single canvas in that shed white. And I was like, I'm just going to start painting like crazy, and I'm going to share it because the world is locked down. Everyone is at home. I don't have another form of income. So I painted everything white, and then I was like, right, I'm going to put 5 canvases up for sale, and they're going to be $120, like just little canvases. And that's how I'm going to start making money. And I just painted my heart out, and I haven't stopped in almost a year and a half. Yeah. And in that space, I went from selling 2 artworks in 2 years to, let me have a look how many commissions I made. I normally know this off the top of my head.
Is this one of your spreadsheets that you're consulting?
Spreadsheet.
Good on you.
Spreadsheet. I went from selling 2 artworks to 267 artworks in space of 6 months.
Wow.
And I just had to do it at the time. I was like, this is going to be a form of income for me. And obviously I loved it, but yeah, I needed to just start at a price point so I could get like a foundation of money and then build up from there. And I knew I always wanted to do that. Like, I didn't want to sort of paint a piece and be like, this is $10,000 and just sit around and wait for it to sell. I wanted to like keep that momentum and that traction and keep it going. So I've slowly like increased my prices over that time. But yeah, that's how I became a full-time artist.
How did you sell your pieces?
On Instagram, and it's still only on Instagram.
Wow.
I need to get my online store going, but I would just put up on my story and it would sell within like a couple of minutes.
And has that audience really kind of followed your journey? Has that come from the candle making, or was there a bit of audience building you did?
I think the audience sort of built naturally back in the day, like especially when I was sort of spending a lot of time in Bali as well. Back when the whole like acai bowl photos and like just that travel aspect of Instagram was very big, and you know, you'd take a holiday and everyone would vicariously live through you. And I think I just jumped on it at the right time and fed the people what they wanted naturally, obviously. But I think I was very lucky to have been there at that time doing the right thing, so to speak, and build from there, because it is so much harder to build or maintain that sort of traction and following now. It just, especially with algorithms and stuff, like so hard. So
yeah, it is so hard, isn't it? I was just saying to my partner this morning, you know, I put a story up and I'm like, how is like not even 1% of my audience receiving this story? Like, what is going on?
So bizarre. It's very hard these days, and you just don't know what people want to see. And I think something that has helped my following as well is that there has been so many different like categories of my life. Like, there's the fashion people, there's the candles, there's the retailer, the homewares, the artists, there's just a lot of different brackets that I think I have slotted into and shared with people over time. So there's definitely a broad mix of people there. And then now like brands, as I sort of dabble in that influencer type stuff.
You hate that word, don't you?
Hate it. I don't know why I hate it.
It gets a bit of a bad reputation, but you know, I think we're really on the quotes here. But you know, the sum of the 7 people you spend the most time with, right? So that's in your real life. There's got to be an element of that in who you engage with in your social space, and the positive influence that you can share, or that as a follower you can gain from being gently influenced by another in a positive way.
Yeah, and I think it's all very transparent these days, and I have always been very honest and open with my followers. Like, I would never sort of implement something that didn't align with me. So yeah, I think sharing that is very natural. Like, I love skincare. I use skincare. Like, I should share different brands and so on that I love. But it's been weird to dabble into, and I think it's just very interesting. It's a very interesting water to navigate.
It's a good segue because I would love to know how your collaborations came about and what part representation or management plays into that.
Yeah, so pretty much all the collaborations have been through Instagram. I think the Coast one actually is my very good friend from Torquay. So she has Blackman's Brewery and Coast is their sort of second child, so to speak. But that was a very natural collaboration. The condoms were a company through Instagram. They loved they sort of wanted to market to women rather than have like black packaging. So they chose the artwork before they actually approached me for the collaboration. They said, hey, we want to use this. We'd love to collaborate with you. Oh my gosh, who else? Recently, I just did the coffee bags for a local coffee roastery. And they were doing a Mother's Day giveaway, and that was all through Instagram. So Instagram is just so powerful. Like, I will not hesitate in saying that it has built my entire business. And at times that is incredibly scary for me. And I know that I have to start. Well, we spoke earlier about how I just posted my first TikTok that's not art, but I know that I have to broaden my horizons in where I am and where I'm putting my work for many reasons. But yeah, they've all pretty much come from Instagram. And you never know who's watching. I remember when Microsoft contacted me because they wanted to gift me all this Microsoft stuff, like, which is crazy. I remember receiving the email and they're like, hi, we've sort of seen what you're doing on Instagram and we'd love to invite you to our Microsoft dinner. I thought it was spam, to be honest. So I threw it in the bin. Luckily, they contacted me again. But long story short, the process sort of started and I ended up having a FaceTime Zoom interview with them, the people from Microsoft. And I remember the guy was like midway through the interview and he was like, oh, we noticed actually like a few months ago you were doing this. And I was like, how long have you guys been watching me? Like, you just never know who is watching.
There's a real element of trust there, isn't there? Again, back to that planning and what you can hope will happen for yourself and be like, oh, if I do this, it might result in this. But really, you just have to trust the process and create what feels authentic to you in the moment and allow it to unfold.
You have to be yourself. And I don't know, people can tell now. Like, as I said earlier, it's just so transparent. People are too smart now with that sort of stuff. Like, I remember years ago, before I was sort of influencing anything, someone would be like, I love this spoon. I'm like, oh, I love that spoon too. Like what? Like, so easily like brainwashed. But now it's just, I think, a bit too flooded and people are getting smarter. So I think natural marketing and natural fits are always the best way to go. My manager.
Yes, tell me about your management and your manager. How did that happen?
Management is something that I had sort of dabbled in on the other side of with candles. So I was like being represented from a PR perspective, which I didn't love. I always felt like no one understood my brand like me. And there were probably elements of me not completely letting them in. And it was probably elements of me not even really knowing what I was doing yet. And I didn't really want someone to tell me. But this side of management was something that came about at the right time. It was something that I didn't know I needed. And it was something that I wasn't sure I wanted as well. It was very conflicting. I was like, yes, I need you, but could I do this myself? Like a manager? It felt so formal. And I talk to her like 10 times a day now. I couldn't possibly live my life without her.
Did she approach you or was that something that you sought out?
So at the end of 2021, I was so inundated with spreadsheets and paintings and orders and collaborations that I got a PA, which sounds wild. Like,
that's fun.
Who gets a PA like 10 months after they've spontaneously gone full time as an artist? Me. So I had a PA for a year right before I moved up here. And she actually sourced Hannah, who is my now manager. And it was such an amazing move. Yeah, it takes a while to sort of build that relationship as well, to understand, like for her to understand me, what I do, who I am, what I want to do and where I want to go. And for also me to, it just takes a while for that relationship to gel. And I'm not saying it was like a time thing for me, but I just didn't know I needed it. And in terms of like where she can take me is amazing. I remember sort of like jotting down a dream list of brands that I wanted to work with. And one is still sitting at the top. And honestly, it is my dream brand and goal in life. I just hope it happens. But there was brands like that I never thought I could work with. And they actually ended up approaching her. So I don't know if I manifested that as well, but just huge brands and big paid partnerships, which is crazy. And I think there are times where I'm so engrossed and overwhelmed in all my different stepping stones and avenues of work that I have to do that I don't often give myself a moment to step back and be like, oh my God, you just got like a very big paid partnership with Bunnings. Like I need to pat myself on the back more. And it's something that I really don't do enough. And yeah, but getting a manager has been the best thing ever. It really has.
Because it sounds like it would be a lot to negotiate and think about. And like you mentioned earlier, there's been times where you have undervalued your work or yourself. And so navigating negotiations and contracts, that must have been overwhelming doing by yourself.
Very much so. And it's daunting because obviously management and PR are one of those things that like you need to put in the time to build that like momentum up. And that was hard for me. Like there were moments I was like, what am I doing? Like, is this the right move? Where am I going? Who am I? And that is just constant. Like as I grow and my career evolves, it's always going to be like that roller coaster. To have someone on that ride with me that is guiding me and wanting the best for me as well. Because yes, I have my boyfriend that I've personally quoted thinks I'm amazing, but you need that person you need that like outsider, that professional that really is in that industry and can help you. So shout out to Hannah.
Love that. And what I'm really interested in learning about from you, you talked a little bit before about, that journey of getting really low in finances and how am I going to build this, and that being a bit of a driver to step more into your creativity, which I know can be a challenge when creativity and income and the two kind of, bounce against each other sometimes.
They're both very spontaneous.
Yeah. How do you manage that world of inconsistent income?
I wouldn't say I manage it. I think it's something that I'm constantly managing. I think, as I've mentioned a few times, having a lot of different columns and fingers in lots of pies now, I like to sort of write down what they are and what can come from them. And I think having that peace of mind gives you a little bit of reassurance as well. And I think when I'm quite positive and optimistic about it, my gates are open a little bit more and the money can flow in, because sometimes when you sort of stress about it, the universe is like, well, you're not giving you any. But yeah, having and knowing those different forms of income is really good, but it's hard. Like, I'm going to be honest, after I sold 267 paintings in a short amount of time, I very harshly discovered what BAS was and tax. And I think having a good accountant is also something that my PA got me and I didn't know I needed. Well, of course we need an accountant, but I had just sort of done that like online accounting for so long, and my sister ran the finances of the actual clothing store. But having a good accountant is key, like especially when you're having a small business, and just guiding you about what's to come and how to manage yourself a bit more as well. It's scary though. Like, yes, you can have these different columns and mindsets of where the money is coming from, but at the end of the day, you have to do the work and you have to plan and schedule and hope that it will all just work out.
And it must be, I mean, you're having a PA at the time earlier, having PR representation and now having management. That's an expense too. So I'm curious, was there I guess, a cycle in your mind where you thought, oh, do I, don't I, can I do this myself to save the money? Or how did you evolve?
Constantly. And I remember wasting thousands of dollars, and I say wasting because it was literally wasted, on making so many mistakes, especially with the candles. And I feel like it was just a lesson that I had to learn and go through. And I was poached by a lot of PR companies and these like glamorous, PowerPoints about where they could take me and so on. And it's no discredit to who they are and what they do, but I was just very vulnerable throughout that time. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, I'll pay you $7,000, of course. Like, I just didn't know. And I remember getting scammed at one stage, through I was trying to buy bulk candle glass from some website, it's China factory. And I just spent all this money, like thousands of dollars. And they're like, oh no, sorry, the factory's closed down. And I was like, what? Like, oh, just the amount, like now that we're talking about it, it's just all coming back to me. And I was like, I just didn't know. And I didn't have anyone to sort of guide me or show me the ropes. And I don't feel or hold a lot of regret for those times. Like, yes, of course, I love the money and I wish I had spent it on something more beneficial, but they're huge lessons. And sometimes you just have to fall into them.
It's so true. There's no guarantees on these paths when we're trying new things or, giving things a go, following energies and curiosities. There's never any guarantee. And I think that's a huge reconciliation. That's a daily challenge for so many of us is, do I do this? Don't I do this? Why isn't it happening already? Why did that happen? Just that up and down is so endless, I think, for so many.
And back to what you just said about like the feeling, like I was always like in those moments, I knew, and I was like, is this a confusion between something that's different and unfamiliar, or is this like a genuine feeling that something's wrong and not going to go right? Like I'm going against the grain. And it's that whole like head and heart, like which one is it? And I'd always be like, I don't know which one's my head or which one's my heart, or what feels wrong and what feels right. And I now, as I become more confident, and I think the confidence branches from that, know which one is which, and I know when something is off. And I even with collaborations, I've been approached by certain brands and big brands, but they don't align with me. And even though I'm not sure why that is, I get that feeling now. And I'm like, okay, here it is again. It's coming up. Something's off. And I'm veering off from that natural grain of my journey or what feels right or where I want to go. But I tapping into that a lot more now, which feels good. So
it's all a lesson. Yeah. And do you have any other creative callings that are in your imagination?
This is like not really a form of creativity that people would think, but I think it's a form of creation. I find myself cooking a lot now, which is crazy because I think that art used to be my creative outlet, and now it's sort of become a job. It still is a creative outlet, but it has that element of you've got to make money, like you've got to create something, like pressure has that element of pressure. And I now find that I really look forward to cooking dinner at night. Like I look forward to having that other element of creation and creativity to create something without monetary or judgmental pressure, if that makes sense.
It does.
Yeah. So I love like making my own pasta and creating different dishes and But then there's elements of my erratic mind that are like, all right, should I go MasterChef my chef now? And I'm like, no, just like your creation. Like you don't need to like monetize or jump ships, Jenna. Like just breathe. I think that is definitely a form of creativity that naturally came about because my other form of creativity became my life.
I mean, I would watch you if you were on MasterChef, so you don't need to put that dream in the bin.
Rice. I can't cook rice.
If you're a listener, if you don't already follow Jenna on Instagram, the rice journey is it's a long, funny, twist and turny one. But yes, you are right. You do struggle with rice. It is hard. It's hard to get right. I feel ya.
But I think people are getting like, you need to just cook rice now. I'm like, I can't like that. I'm getting there, baby steps.
Yeah, well, that's a beautiful creative calling, and I know what you mean. I love to get in the kitchen naturally, so it is definitely a form of creativity. I think there's far more forms of creativity that we don't give creative credit to, and the word artist is not used enough. That's probably what I would say. There's a few elements of preconceived notion about what an artist is or isn't, and what art is, and there's a beautiful page you probably follow, Inspired to Write. Her name is Amy McNee, and I'll put it in the show notes. She actually, spoiler alert, will be a future guest, but she talks a lot about creativity and your own forms of creativity. It's not necessarily being a painter or just being a writer or just this or just that, or something that you go to school for years and years and years. It doesn't have to just be that. It can come from unusual places. Creativity and the act of being an artist lives within so many of us if we can just kind of tap into it and let it breathe, as you say.
Absolutely. Like, there's so many people that come to my workshops and they're like, almost like put these disclaimers out. They're like, oh, just so you know, like, I'm not very good at this. Like, I'm not an artist. Like, they're like, oh, but I've never painted before. And I was like, well, that's probably why you think you're not good at it, because you've never done it and you're never going to get any better at it not doing it. So you may as well just give it a crack. And they're like, yeah, you're right, actually. And then there's people that come to workshops and they're still painting now, and they text me and they're like, how cool is this? Like, I'm getting better. And I'm like, that's because you keep doing it. Like, you're creating, and we all have like an element of creation inside of us. And I think a lot of the people that say that they don't haven't given it a crack, or they haven't even tried.
We're all in a hurry to be like the perfect version, like the end goal version, or what, the good version. Is so scary to suck at something for so many of us. So I love that you're offering workshops as well, because letting people into your art and your process and allowing that creativity to grow in others is just one of the many reasons you're successful.
They're very fun. I still get nervous before them. I don't know why.
I always get nervous for a podcast. Like, my hands get oh my God, my hands get sweaty. I often wear a turtleneck. My listeners who follow me on Instagram will know that you often see me in the video with a turtleneck on, because I get like red in the neck. I'm like, why? It doesn't matter how many times, whenever you're doing something, you're putting yourself out there. It's just you. It's scary. And we just got to embrace and go for it.
And like, I guess with the workshops, like, I do. I know their names, but I don't know who's going to rock up. Like, I don't know their energies or who they are. And I used to do them with 15 people, which is the fast way to anxiety, like, many reasons. Like, imagine 15 people in my method of artwork. Just, it's wild. I now do them with like maximum 5 to 6. And it is just so much more of a personal experience. I can actually get to know them, like, actually all face to face, help them out and spend time with them. But yeah, I still get so nervous. Oh my gosh. The biggest kookaburra just flew up. Sorry.
Your place is wild. The off-grid living, there's silent cows.
I've been like starting off, like watching sheep get in the yard, watching cows.
And I was gonna ask our closing question, but you've just led me into it, thinking about the giant kookaburra and the Highland cows. How has that transition been for you to live in a place so different to what you were living in and what many people live in?
It's crazy, and it is polar opposite. Like, I have gone from Torquay beach my whole life to a literal mountaintop. Like, it is, I think it's the highest residential property in either Victoria or Australia, one or the other, big difference. Wow. It's 100 acres, the top of a mountain, middle of nowhere. And I didn't realize how much it would affect my creativity. And I say affect because it has sort of like not stopped it, but I think I had so much pressure on myself to have new ideas and a new space, and the space is incredible. And I just assumed in my head that the second I moved in, it would all just flood in and my style would change and my colors would change. And it didn't happen, and it hasn't happened, but I'm sure it will. But moving house is hard, and a complete transition to a new place has been really hard. I can't just drive my car down the street and grab a coffee or some paint supplies, which I used to do. It's very different. And then the whole element of living off grid as well is a huge adjustment. Like, I can't just sit up in my studio and paint. I have to fill generators and turn solar panels and light fires for hot water. Like, what?
Wow.
Yeah, it's a huge transition, and even just like the accessibility to certain things, and yeah, it's a lot. It's taken a lot. I feel like I said to my partner the other day, I've only just started to feel creative, and we moved in December, and it's now May. So
I think we can often underestimate the effect moving ourselves physically or going through a big uprooting change can have on our our energy systems, and allowing all those things to settle, and learning who you are within this new space. It makes a lot of sense.
And I love that my followers are invested and involved, and they're my cheerleaders, but so many of them are like, you'll be so inspired, like can't wait to see what you create. And I'm just up in my studio being like, oh shit. I got nothing. I love that, and I love that support and their enthusiasm, but I just think too much.
Well, Jenna, I mean, I think what you're doing and what you're creating, from an outside perspective, and I know it feels very different when you're in your own head, but from an outside perspective, it's beautiful and it's honest and it's exactly what you need to be doing. And I think allowing ourselves to not put too much pressure on what we're doing, but also maybe just that awareness of the pressures that we place on other people as well, and our expectations is really important to think about. Just, that letting things roll is a real message I've taken from you today, and noticing where your curiosity leads you, what you need, what your energies are telling you. I think that at the end of the day is all we can be sure about is leaning into that. It's a beautiful lesson. So I hope just reflecting on some of that today for you reminds you of how special you are. And you're giving a lot back to your followers, but also your workshop people and the people who get to hang your art in their homes. I'm curious, how can the listener and I support you?
Add me on Instagram, follow me, engage. Come along on the journey, because it is really beautiful. And as much as I get nervous before podcasts and all of that stuff, it is a really nice way to sort of go back and delve into how far you've come and how far I've come and where I'm at now. And I feel like really proud of myself after just spending like however long talking about where I've been, how I got here. It's crazy. Like, I'm like, oh yeah, I did all that stuff. I should be so proud of myself. So yeah, come and follow me on Instagram and watch me cook rice.
And go on TikTok and see the blue garlic video that's blowing up.
Add me on TikTok. Love Ludie, at Love Ludie, LOVELUDIE. Watch the blue garlic video. I did not know garlic did that.
We're always learning. It's just ever evolving. It's a very funny video. Yeah, it's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast today, and I'll make sure to have the link. Oh, absolute pleasure. I've really enjoyed talking to you and hearing about your journey. So yes, listener, please go follow Jenna at Love Ludie. I'll make sure that the links are all in the show notes. And if you love this chat as much as I love bringing it to you, hit that star button, leave us a review. It's, like I said, engagement and support on the journey when you're a creator is like, is there something better than gold, like diamonds? I don't know, but just like the most important thing. So yes, listeners, if you've enjoyed this, get around us, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to Unemployed and Afraid, the stories of starting over with your host, me, Kim Curtin. If you liked the episode and are keen to hear more, please hit the follow button and leave a review. And let's keep the conversation going on Instagram at Unemployed and Afraid, where there's more goodies and links to today's show notes. See you there.